Okay, I'll call this meeting to order, and we have the minutes of October 19th.
I'll move that we adopt the minutes of October 19th.
I'll second it.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We have warrants 9, 9P, Recreation Board number 6, and Capital Fund number 1.
I will move that we, for the warrants 9, 9P, Recreation Board number 6, and Capital Fund number 1, that we adopt those.
I'll second it.
Okay, any discussion? Warrant 9 is for $34,670.14. I think that includes all the late additions.
I think it does.
And that's going to fuel a partial payment on the county tax, payroll transfers, health insurance, and our Wyndham Regional Commission annual dues. Those were some of the highlights. The capital fund is going towards the new truck that's being put together for the town highway. So, any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. The only ARPA update I know of is in the warrants, there was a payment to the Recreation Board for skating rink and some other addition to.
Was it soccer goals?
Oh, maybe
Oh, that might have been one it
soccer
was.
goals, yeah. Yeah, I saw them out there on the way over. So now we have some visitors today, or a visitor, maybe another one coming. And I'll let you introduce yourself.
Yes, I'm just, Laura's wondering where this is, so I'm just texting her to make sure that she knows how to find this. Our adjustment back into real time out of Zoom is always interesting, thank you. But I'm gonna start, she will find us. Thank you so much. I'm Jen Stromson from BDCC and SEVEDS, and it's really nice to be here in person, so thank you. And thank you for accommodating. I will talk about kind of some updates with our programming, and then when Laura comes in, I'll let her sort of talk about the bigger picture and the regionalness of it all, because we have a special request just for a letter of support towards sort of our next step towards becoming an EBD district. So we shared some materials ahead of time about what's going on with our programming. The annual report, which sort of looks backwards at things that we've been doing, is on our website. I only have the digital version up. I'll have physical copies that I will share to the select board as soon as I have those in hand, hopefully next week. But one of the things that we shared with you is kind of a letter that just summarizes, like high level, some relevant programming that's going on right now. So I'll touch on a few things that I know are kind of near and dear, the things we get a lot of questions about. So right now, we're organizing a local housing summit for communities. There are a lot of housing conferences going on statewide, and there are various gatherings, but there are a lot of communities doing their own discernment and thinking and planning about housing. And so we're going to host a gathering on December 1st that's really geared to help communities learn from each other, get some kind of support from the Vermont Housing Finance Agency about how to think about housing projects if you want to do housing projects in your community. It's really about what communities are trying to get done. So this there's sort of no agenda about what kind of housing or what, it's more an answer to questions that we're hearing from communities and various projects around, how do our teachers find homes, how do the workers of the town find a way to live here, how do people who are maybe aging out of the home that they've lived in for a long time but still want to stay in their community, stay in our communities. So that's really what this gathering will be geared towards. I left the postcards for that at the office. That's one of the things Laura had to grab before she was coming here. So you'll be getting postcards about that and hearing a lot about that. We have some other things coming down the pike with that program. That's the SVEP program. That's the program that's really community capacity building oriented. And one of those will be a civic engagement boot camp. Every town asks questions about how we're going to get more people involved, more people on committees, and how do we get the people who do join, if they join, kind of up to speed and the resources they need without them, having to travel far to trainings and things like that. So we're going to do some very specific trainings to really help increase, hopefully, the volunteer capacity in towns and answer some questions about, like, what happens when I stop being the select board chair? That's how we all have this. I have this in my community. I'm the youngest person on 3 committees, which is not good news, right? So that's a couple of things. We have been working on the business side, the small business side. We've been sort of adding lending tools, especially as interest rates are rising. We are trying to make ourselves sort of a better, a public sector alternative to commercial borrowing and financing for businesses. We're a much more forgiving underwriter of lending for, and there's a lot of creativity that we can bring to those loans for small businesses. On the workforce side, we just had our favorite event ever. We've been planning this for a couple of years. It was a reality fair. We held it at Leland and Gray High School, but students from every high school were invited. We had a great busload of kids from, I guess maybe 2 busloads from Wyndham Regional, the Career Center. And it's sort of different waves of kids from 4 different schools. And it was a morning where kids would be assigned, it had some choice, a career and a budget that went along with that, and learning how much taxes come out and what health insurance costs. And then they had to go around and kind of shop. And we had volunteers from banks and car dealerships, and they had to sort of make decisions about, like, am I gonna have a car? Am I gonna bike? Am I gonna have roommates? Or am I gonna try and buy a home? And at the end of the time, they had to sort of come up with a balanced budget. And there's also a bunch of life skills stuff, which is, everything from like changing tires to like how to make yourself an omelet. So it was super fun. It's something we've been wanting to do since before COVID and had been kind of in the works. And the idea is to sort of, obviously keep it fun, but to really put kids sort of in a position. Everybody talks about financial literacy and having them kind of connect up the dots, but when you kind of put that worksheet in their hands and they have some agency and walk around and do that, and they are interacting with grown-ups and having these conversations about those choices, it's just super special. So that was incredibly fun. Those 2 weeks ago, it was like on the Above the Fold in the Reformer. They gave us great coverage on that. That gives you an idea of our high school programming. We do career education work. I have a full-time person who does that every day in the high schools, but that's the most kind of compelling and creative example of sort of what that looks like. Oftentimes it's working classrooms and connecting kids with mentors and things like that. But, and then refugee work is something we get asked a lot about. We are, at BDCC, we're working on the employment side of that and also working with employers. But to zoom out to sort of what the kind of strategic planning and regional thing, several years ago, Sevens was formed because of this sort of question of how can we take some control over our destiny. And is the economy a thing that happens to us, or is there some way that we can start to kind of shape things in a way that we as a region have some influence over and some say in? And so the first SEDS, which is the strategic plan, it's the acronym for that, in 2014 really identified a need to take on a shrinking workforce. Having an aging demographic, being the second oldest county and the second oldest state, means we could see already at that time that the shortage of workers was going to be pretty acute. And we were starting to hear it from schools and hear it from hospitals. At that time, that wasn't really something that everybody believed was coming, because I think it just hadn't really happened that way for about a century. Right? It's happened in Vermont before, but it had been a while, maybe a generation and a half. But so in the most recent SEDS, we got a little bit more focused on what are the strategies. When we look at other communities across the country that are successfully nurturing talent here, we knew we had to focus more on high school, so we began our high school program 4 years ago. We knew we had to really double down on retention, but not just making sure kids stayed here or came back here, but that they knew how to make a good living and build a life for themselves here. So that was one focus. But another focus was immigration. What we saw in communities across the country where there was some kind of level of dynamism in in the economy and in the schools and the workforce was some immigration, maybe not the levels that are typical of the entire country, but some. And so we set out on this journey to kind of figure out how to make that easier here, and so long story short, a lot of different things have come together, and so we began working with this agency last year and helped them put together their federal application for Brattleboro to become a refugee resettlement site. And so that's been just a tremendous journey. And I think, we kind of anticipated that the community would really kind of lean in and can be incredible, but it's been really amazing. And we didn't expect it to be so many people at once. We thought it was going to be dribs and drabs of people from all over the world, which it will be over time, but we ended up with the Afghanistan situation. And I guess maybe we should have all predicted that, but I guess we didn't. So we had 100-something people arrive really quickly last January, and they are just a wide range of talents and backgrounds and skills. So again, I work with my team on a lot of the employment part of that, and so we have about 60 people in full-time jobs, and they range from people who have a background in soldiering for 20 years, fighting alongside American soldiers, to civil engineers and artists, teachers, just an incredible range of people. One of the blessings of the early wave was that there was a young man named Amir who came at that time, who actually had experience himself in migrant resettlement in Afghanistan, helping people fleeing countries with even more problems. And so he's worked with refugees and employment. And so we hired Amir, and he helps a lot with that. And he's incredible. And we just kind of, take his lead on how to do that. So that's been a really big part of our year. Again, it's not the only thing that we do, but those are some samples of things that are going on. So I will turn to the funding request in a second, but I just would love to, while I'm talking about programs, see if you have any questions or anything that you would like me to touch on more specifically.
Are there any other outreach programs for to bring people in other than dealing with the refugees, which of course is excellent. The 60 of them have jobs. That's great. But are there any other ways of getting people from other states?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's really what we spent a lot of the last few years doing. We started a young professionals group, I want to say 6 years ago, really as a way to help people find a peer group here and make professional connections. And so our Young Professionals group really remains that. And it's something, they have regular social events, but they also do first-time homebuyer classes and, financial literacy and grants for professional development and things like that. What's actually kind of fun is that ends up being like this thing that builds on itself. And so there's a family, a household that moved actually to Dummerston in the past year, and they've become people who now organize events for more young professionals. And I think for young people moving here, if they find their people, right, they find a way to stay. And if they don't, even if they like their job, it can be really hard to kind of want to put down roots. And I think that gets easier maybe once you have kids, you start to plug in that way. But for folks who don't have that right away, that's it's really kind of a lifeline. So that's still a big deal. Like that's Casey, he's my staffer who works on that, and he kind of lives it and runs it. We also do a lot of other kind of under the hood things. We help companies with recruitment. So I have, it's kind of wonky, but I have like a recruiter tool on LinkedIn, and so I can help companies post on that and do like recruiter searches for specialized positions. So we help Groundworks with 2 positions this year. So it might be a company, it might be a nonprofit. The Vermont River Conservancy right now is, reached out and asked for help trying to post some jobs. And so that's the kind of thing I can help them socialize with young professionals and put it out on LinkedIn, and even kind of act a little bit like a recruiter and try and help them find candidates for that. And then another thing that we sometimes do, if we can, depending on our capacity, is just sort of help people when they're trying to move here. So there's a person who was, I will just say it because you won't mind if I say it actually, who was coming to a job as a landscape architect in the region, and was also, one big question that people have when they're trying to, even if they know what job they're gonna have, is they're like, my partner needs to figure out what they're gonna do and make connections. And so we try to just help people that reach out to us and make, brainstorm and understand, like tell us what your field is, and we understand the employers, so we kind of help you figure out who those employers are that you might want to send your resume to, and start to introduce them to a few people who are just in the community in a similar stage of life or something. So we refer to that program as TARE, Targeted Expertise Recruitment. It's really when someone finds their way to us through referral, and we just have a lot of nonprofits and other employers and private sector employers who I've worked with over the years who just know to send someone to us if they're trying to get them here and they're struggling with it. And it can be anything from like, we have a child with special healthcare needs we don't understand how to navigate the regional medical system. And I'm just making referrals to them, to people who are experts in that, but that who we know in the community. And that's the kind of stuff that can be really intimidating to people moving to a rural place. So, yeah. And that's actually a really fun part of my job, just to be honest. Yeah. It's very personal. A lot of what I do can be very
Very good,
abstract, so, yeah.
Good. Thank you.
Someone just starting a business, they could contact you to get advice or?
Yeah, we're right this month, we lost our business technical assistance provider 3 weeks ago, so we're in the process of hiring. And triaging. So we're kind of referring people to other agencies right now. So like right now I have some New Americans working in a business, and there's an organization in Burlington that has some capacity that I've referred them to. So we can usually match people up if they're in kind of an urgent place, if they're at a point where they really need something right now. And then we'll be building some cohorts so we can help kind of move people who maybe are going at a more comfortable pace, like starting a business or something. We have all the tools we've always had, but we have LivePlan that we can give people access to build business plans. But it doesn't really matter if you don't have someone to help shepherd you through the process. So we really believe in that personal touch. We're just down a person, and also scrambling and applying to things because we really like to have more than we'd like to grow that capacity. There's a lot of one of the things that happens when times are weird economically is there tends to be a lot of entrepreneurial energy. So we want to be there to support that we're just sort of, we've spent a lot of the last few years delivering relief services, and we're still doing that. So we still have one staffer who spends most of his time helping people in the sole proprietor relief program and that program is great because it's flexible, like a company can say what they want, and then we help them develop the scope of work and then pay the vendor to give it to them. So it might be tax services, it might be marketing services or a website. So that's a nice thing about that program. It doesn't have to be just for damages. It can also help people pivot or move forward if they've struggled through COVID. So that is another way that we're helping small businesses, but that's not flexible enough to help people starting a business. So that's kind of an irritating constraint, is what we'd say. So.
Okay, great.
Hey. So I'm sorry, I should have been more explicit about this. So I'm just the funding request, we're really, really grateful that you allowed us to not petition during COVID. We had petitioned, I think, for 3 years successfully prior to COVID for the amount that's based on the funding formula that we use, which is $3 per person. Based on 2010 census, your 2020 census number is up 1 person. You put us in the budget last year for $3,600, and that is great. Again, I love us not having to petition because it frankly gives us the time to do more of the work that we do. And it's a good use of our time. We're also using that time in part to reach more communities. And we have 2 small communities that we have never tried to petition or get us funding and we're probably going to get there this year, and that's great because there's 27 communities that we serve. Last year, 19 funded us. Our goal would be to sort of, through the time that it takes, build those relationships and end up with every community finding, a way to support us. And that's a process of relationship building, and we've been doing it over the last 10 years. So, but yeah, so I hope that you will find your way to put us into the general budget.
Yes.
And the rest is up to you. If that's okay, I'm gonna turn it over to Laura just to talk about that.
Okay.
I apologize for being late. Let me cut to the chase. What I'm hoping is that the town of Dummerston will write a letter. I have a draft that I can share with you in support of the Southern Vermont zone, which I will tell you about, being federally designated as an economic development district. So very, I will go briefly here. The SEDS process, I think you all are familiar with that. That's a 5-year federal planning process that is done regionally. There are requirements for it to be public, for certain parts of it to be the participation for certain parts of that. We use that process, we look at our data, look at our assets, go out to our communities, say here's what we've been doing the last 5 years, here's where we think we should be going, here's what the data tells us, what are you seeing, what are you feeling, what do you think? Through that process, we put together a plan for a 5-year plan. That plan is implemented by many different entities, but chiefly BDCC, Wyndham Regional, BCRC, Bennington County Regional Commission, and their entities are implementers. Let me explain why Bennington County is an implementer. In 2015, we looked at the legislature. I'm going really fast on this because I think you want me to go really fast. So the legislature designated Wyndham and Bennington counties as a Southern Vermont Economic Development Zone, which was an area that had specific distress criteria, largely around lack of population and aging population and diminishing vitality.
And low wages.
Yes, and low wages. So those things are all connected, right? So, and that was that. There was a subcommittee that was put together to look at that, talk about things that should happen, and the largest recommendation coming out of there was you should develop a 2-county SEDS. Previously, we had developed a Wyndham County SEDS in 2014. So in 2019, we did that. We developed a 2-county SEDS. The federal government had invited us, before we did that, to do that 2-county SEDS and seek federal designation. We have the state designation, which comes with no dollars or support or anything. Invited us to seek federal designation. And federal designation does a couple of things. It does provide a small amount of resources, not enough for a person, but to help implement or coordinate the implementation of the SEDS across the Wyndham and Bennington counties. In addition, projects that are within the zone and within an economic development district, something that the federal government has designated, are seen as better investments of taxpayer dollars because it's known that there was a process, a public process utilized to put together a long-term strategic plan that looked at data, that engaged the public, that has accountable entities, and so it's not likely just a one-off something, it's part of a larger plan. And so as we seek federal designation, we need a majority of the towns in the zone to support that designation. We also need the major industrial sectors. We need the governor. We need a number of other entities to support that. And so what we've been doing is going to the communities in Wyndham and Bennington County asking for that support. So I can expand on that forever, but I'll stop there.
Once you have,
One other thing I would say is I've given you the SEDS,
okay,
okay?
all right. Once this comes into existence and you get federal recognition, where the federal government would provide the funding for this, or would you be coming to the towns for funding?
So it would provide a small amount of funding to the district itself for implementation. So we're looking at like $50,000 or $60,000 a year for the entire zone. We would use that for capacity likely. When COVID happened, capacity meaning capacity to implement the SEDS. So for instance, programs like our workforce development programs, our Southern Vermont Economy Project, our Young Professionals Project, I mean any number of our programs, or water and sewer projects, it will just give us more capacity to help coordinate. So are you all familiar with the Southern Vermont Economy Project?
Yeah, I was talking about the housing summit, and that's the kind of programming.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's, one of the things that we really struggle with is, we, like the regional commissions, there's not a lot of baseline funding, and they're, thank heavens, gonna grow a little bit because that capacity is really needed. we also just don't have a lot of baseline capacity. And so when we're trying to develop a program or go after funding for it, the municipal funding is really critical to us. But we're limited, we have to bring money to the table to get money for everything that we do. So
something that's really become very clear to me in my other role, which is not the hat I'm wearing today, is so we don't have county government, which I'm not advocating for. However, that is a lot of capacity for our small towns. It isn't necessarily there, right? So when you have state programs or resources or opportunities, and 250 towns of varying sizes with varying amounts of staff, who largely have a lot of similar challenges. They may also have a number of unique ones, but there are a number of similar challenges that they're facing. There's not really enough heft there to kind of help support communities in an efficient way. For instance, water and wastewater are things right now that a lot of towns are looking at. For instance, one of the big things we've worked on is workforce. We have a shared workforce in the region. So I don't know if I'm answering your question, Z. Another, what I was going to say about funding, so when COVID happened, the pandemic happened, the federal government wanted to get money on the ground quickly, and so it actually put money into those economic development districts pretty quickly, several $100,000, and they knew that those were entities that would be able to get those out for business relief. That's what it was at that time.
Well, and other things, they can use it for other things. So one of my great frustrations of COVID, was watching, to the south. I live in Franklin County, Massachusetts, so it's great because I live there. But that's an EDD in that area, and
Economic Development District,
which is what we're trying to become. And so they received one of these grants, right. And they were able to. They had a lot of discretion on how they could use it, and they were able to do a thing that we have been trying to do with the Planning Commission in this region, which is to go town by town and to do a full assessment of what are the infrastructure challenges around water, wastewater, or other kinds of water issues. And we have been trying to plan that and queue that up for a couple of years at this point. And that's the sort of thing that there just isn't really, you can go town by town, and there are a couple towns that just got awards, that are getting awards for infrastructure, water infrastructure. But to really take a step back and say, what is the need in the area, and to be able to advocate for the right amount of funding and resources to touch down in this region, there's just no there to really understand that and to help communities go after that. And it's,
How do the, how do the, well, let's take the example of the Franklin County, your county that is an EDZ. Is that what?
yeah.
Now, when the federal government allocated funds to that county, who administered them, who distributed them, and who did they go to?
It went to the EDD, which is and so that's a great question because it's a group. So the COG ended up doing that study. So I think that the Council of Governments, because they don't have county government either. So but the EDD is its own organization, as it would be here.
Here it would be Wyndham Regional, BDCC, Bennington County Regional, Bennington's Economic Development, and SEVEDS as kind of the entity that is administering the Economic Development District.
And how do they distribute the funds?
So there would be, on an annual basis, we're looking at a small amount of funds, like 50 or 60.
No, I know. In the case of a crisis situation, you can use your county as an example if you like, but how did a town in Franklin County get money from
it
that
wasn't
program?
It wasn't done in that way. It wasn't given to towns. They did a region-wide study. And so that, in some ways, I think that sounds like a non-answer, but it's not about distributing money to towns. It's about doing things that aren't town level, that are really regional level. And which is different. That's really what they use that money distinctly for, because like here, towns were getting ARPA money or were getting money, like relief money from the state and the federal government. But in order to do things at a regional scale, like if you were to look at like a broadband thing, or some kind of infrastructure thing, or a transit study, or
workforce,
anything that's regional, anything that's multi-town, there is some capacity for coordination, but there's not much money to do things, right? And so you know, I get that people get a little frustrated with, planning feels like not doing, but a lot of times when you do a thing without planning, you end up not doing the right thing. And so if you're not, and what we're finding with the infrastructure money, so part of why this is a little nerve-wracking for us is, the planners and the economic planners, like we all know that there's infrastructure money coming, there's resources coming down, but that a lot of the groundwork to really decide how would this money be best spent, whether it's at a town level, a multi-town level, like a sub-regional level, there hasn't been most effectively spent. There hasn't been the opportunity, the capacity, the investment to help those conversations take shape and to really encode that in a way that then makes something shovel ready. I mean, that's kind of what that term means, is we talked about it and we said, we are town X and we decided that our water and sewer is about to break down and we'd like to expand it over here. And we've agreed as a community about what we want going forward. That process takes time and energy and leadership. And that is, especially like when it comes to things that are multi-town and transportation workforce, there just hasn't been a lot of resource for that. And because the federal government speaks county, which is, it's frustrating, but in many ways that's the way that they want to put money on the ground. And we don't have, I think, Laura's experience with Tropical Storm Irene and disaster planning is like, FEMA doesn't know how to speak local. And when things happen at the state level, things are lost in translation, but that a town on its own trying to speak federal, it gets really hard. And that's a lot of times in times of great opportunity and great crisis, the federal government wants to work at this regional scale.
So if I could just, let me ask your question maybe differently, how would Dummerston benefit or leverage an economic development district? So hopefully Dummerston will participate in the SEDS development process. When there are infrastructure projects or projects that are important to the residents and voters in Dummerston, it'd be great to have those be a part of the SEDS. We do an annual SEDS project request. And we do a lot of outreach to pull projects in to make sure we're aware of priority. We come to these meetings to make sure we're understanding what is happening in communities, what are the priorities, what are the challenges, and that's how that gets kind of built into the plan. And so this EDD, again, it's helping to implement the plan. So hopefully Dummerston has been a part of that, but if we have like an emergent issue, it would be, we'd have to reach out to all of you like we do with this process.
And I think other examples are things like childcare, that's, one of them, and sometimes they're programmatic things. They're not, infrastructure is an easy thing to lean on because people understand very tangible things, but, childcare is another thing that we're, really active in, and the most recent things that we've been working on are programmatic. They're actually developing we've used some of the USDA capacity that we have to work with the Child Care Counts Coalition and pay for a series that's about childcare startups, because we've lost a lot of, not just we've lost some capacity in the bigger childcare facilities, but we've actually lost a lot of in-home childcare operators over the years due to people just aging out and regulatory changes and COVID. And so we've created a video series and a webinar series to really support people whose startup is a childcare startup. Because that's the kind of thing that has a huge regional impact, right? Like it's very likely that if someone lives in Dummerston, they probably are using childcare in Brattleboro. But maybe they would prefer to have someone in Dummerston, because a lot of times we would prefer to have our kids, be in childcare closer to home. This is something that's, it's kind of diffuse, but it affects everybody. And, what we've seen in the research that, Building Bright Futures and Let's Grow Kids have been doing is that one of our big workforce challenges is people who have left the workforce not necessarily voluntarily, but because they've had, COVID-related illness or losing childcare and things like that. So that's another one of these kind of regional things, and some of our big projects that have come through the SEDS process have been things like that, programmatic things like childcare and workforce development.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Fill in the blank. Dummerston should sign this letter of support because blah, 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 blah.
There are some things you just can't do alone as a town.
Oh, that's pretty good. Yes.
Stronger together, sometimes.
Okay, good. That was a good
Sorry, motto.
answer. What would you have said?
I would have said, something along those lines, you know, the regional capacity, where, you know, you're in support, you recognize the need for regional capacity to help towns that don't have you know, you don't have a workforce development director here, or, you know, maybe you don't have a project manager here, you know, so that assistance is important to you all.
Is there a deadline for the letter?
I've been telling people that we hope to have it in by December. I feel like that is aspirational. But January the latest. So I can turn around a draft to you. Probably do it while we're sitting here, but in the morning for your next meeting, if you're willing to consider it, and change it however you like. But
Sure.
And then how many other towns have already sent a letter in?
right, and that's one of my jobs that I'm supposed to have been doing. No one has said no yet. I have in my inbox Brattleboro and Putney, Marlboro, Townsend. Who else is in? And then just a bunch of towns that are in process. I
Right,
have one Dorset, I think, is in.
Guilford, yes, we just don't have it in hand.
Dover. So, you know, we're just, Rockingham, so.
Those communities have actually sent the letter, is that correct? Is that what you're saying?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, so what's been happening is we're sending you information, we come and we talk about it. I turn around a draft, send it to you, and then either at the next meeting or a town administrator is signing it and sending it back.
And I think back to you asked really good questions about like how will this be administered, what is this entity? I mean, that is, you know, it will be a, you know, transparent body, you know, that will represent the region, and so I think in some ways it's not a mysterious other thing, it's just that it can't be just a Wyndham thing or a Bennington thing, so it has to be a new thing, so that we can do this together, but it will very much, you know, be sort of in the nature of an outgrowth of the sort of the grassroots.
It has to act as a public body.
Yeah. So nonprofit, like it's there to represent the wishes of the community and the strategic planning that is, you know, sort of ground up, so.
Okay.
That's the idea.
Good. What's this now?
That's the housing stuff.
The housing,
That's-
okay.
Yeah, that's
All right, thank you
Yeah.
for this. And you have a draft of the letter, do you?
Or you'll send one.
To send one?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay,
Very well.
great.
Right.
Good.
Good.
Thank you very much.
Any other
I'm gonna
questions?
go with my dog.
Okay.
Have a good night.
Thank you
Yes.
very much.
Thanks for coming in.
Yeah, very interesting.
Hi, nice to see you.
Nice job. Great. Okay, so we'll get that letter, take a look, and
Yeah.
put it on your agenda for next. Okay, well, let's see. We have the road foreman's report. And there's not much to report. Let's see, there's a sign that's going to be coming for Windmill Hill. There are no more dead-end signs. It's no outlet now. So that's coming. There have been some signs that have been stolen in town. They've actually been cutting the posts and taking the signs away. So
What are the signs have said?
I'm not sure which ones
yeah.
have been taken, but yeah. So Lee's ordering some more signs. The road crew's been grading, blowing leaves, just, I guess, waiting for snow to come. Trying to keep busy. So, let's see, is there anything under correspondence for information that you'd like to go over?
The radar speed signs note letter that we received, I was wondering, have we ever considered buying one of those things and putting it in, you know, what might be a good spot for, because I think they are quite effective.
I think, you know, the subject came up a couple of times in the past years, but
Yeah.
at the time, they were pretty expensive.
Uh-huh.
More expensive than we
Yeah.
wanted.
Yeah,
And I was wondering about maintaining them. We'd have to then,
yeah, and move them
around.
so on and so forth.
and
Yeah.
what's nice with the sheriff's department is we get, you know, real-time data.
Oh yeah.
So,
Yes. Yeah.
yeah.
I thought they were suggesting that there might be a special price available or
Yeah.
something, but you know, I don't.
Do you want to check?
I'll look into that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll look into it.
We could try one outside my house, you know.
All right, because we have speeders, I'll tell you that.
Anything else on that list? Okay. Under new business, I don't think we have any ARPA updates.
I don't think so, no.
No? We know we're probably going to get a few more proposals in. We have the errors and omission certificate from the listers that we need to.
Yeah.
I'll make a motion that we sign the errors and omissions certificate from the listers.
And I will second that.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Hold on, wait. All those, jumping the gun. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, all right. Go for it.
All right.
Okay, and there's, oh, well, okay.
All right, so I'll make a motion that we recess the meeting and convene as a liquor control board.
Second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Let's see, there's a catering request from Dutchman's Tavern for an event at the Scott Farm on November 12th.
I'll make a motion that we approve the liquor catering request to be held at the Dutchman's Tavern, from the Dutchman's Tavern to be held at Scott Farm on 11/12.
I'll second it.
Okay, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
One abstention.
So I'll make a motion that we adjourn as the liquor control board and reconvene the regular meeting.
I'll second that.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Let's see, is there any other new business?
I don't think so.
There's something I had, but I guess it'll have to wait for my memory to catch up. So
Kick it.
Yeah, we'll kick it down the road a little.
All right, so I'll make a motion, we adjourn.
I'll second that.